Birthdays get quieter as you age. The candles matter less than the hands that light them. My kitchen smelled of cinnamon and warm butter while steam rose from the kettle. A store-bought cake waited on a chipped plate, its frosting slightly crooked, fitting a house that has carried me for decades without complaint. I laid out mismatched plates, wiped the old oak table I refinished years ago, and let the quiet settle like a shawl. Beside the cake sat a manila folder, the only thing new in the room. Tomorrow morning I meet my attorney to finish a trust, paperwork built from years most people didn't notice, the sale of my repair business, 2 paid-off rentals I maintained before dawn. I never advertised any of it. I kept those details to myself for years. I wore the same coat, fixed what I could, and put away what I couldn't spend. Simple on the surface, steady underneath. The front door clicked and my son stepped in with the cold. He scanned the room the way a critic scans a menu, eyes lingering on the scuffed baseboard, the thrift store chairs, the single strand of lights I've used every year. He hugged me quick and distracted, then studied the cake like it owed him an apology. Love sits heavy in him, I know, but so does disappointment he won't name. Warm rituals met a chill I could feel in my knuckles. He lifted his glass, the room tightened. I thought of tomorrow's signatures. He kept the glass raised a beat too long, and the smile he wore had edges. By then his wife had set the cups on the table, the children had found their seats, and steam from the kettle stitched the air between us. I could still feel the manila folder on the hall table like a quiet heartbeat, tomorrow's signatures waiting while tonight pretended to celebrate. He cleared his throat, nodded toward the crooked frosting, and called it a toast. As if reading a review, he listed the evidence: the small house, the patched rug, the routines that never made the feeds. "Your life is useless," he said, voice dressed as humor but heavy with disdain, and the word fell like a plate on tile. One child's fork froze halfway to a mouth. His wife looked at her lap. My name is the only one they use for grandfather, and suddenly it felt fragile in their mouths. My chest warmed then cooled like a stove turned down before it smokes. At my own table on my birthday, I was being measured by square footage and shine. The stakes were not the room, they were the threads that hold fathers and sons through hard years, the bridge we have crossed and could still burn. He is my only child. I have buried enough to know how long regret lasts. I pressed my palm flat on the oak I refinished with him when he was 13 and chose breath over a rebuttal. Silence to him has always sounded like surrender, but to me it is a tool. He took my quiet as permission and continued, suggesting I consider selling, downsizing now, making things easier by signing papers he would help handle, as if competence arrives in a briefcase. He chuckled at my morning walks and the way I repair what I can. He was not born cruel. He is tired, ambitious, anxious about bills I once hid from him so he could sleep. Human motives are messy. Still, the public sting of his judgment reddened the room like a rash. I poured tea to keep my hands busy, let the steam fog my glasses, and looked at the children long enough to remember why dignity matters. Worth is not a speech. It is a ledger only time can audit. I would answer him, but not with volume and not tonight. The folder on the hall table waited, steady as a lighthouse he had not yet learned to see. I cut the cake, passed slices without commentary, and drew a line under the evening that tomorrow would explain. For now, I kept the room gentle and my temper held. Until the plates rattled, his voice did not. He leaned back, measuring the room for a quick sale, and said we shouldn't waste years. "You could sell this place while the market is hot," he added, flicking crumbs as if they were weak choices. "Move somewhere modern, I can line up the paperwork, make it easier." The word easier stretched. He glanced at the manila envelope by the keys, then away like checking a clock. I handed out small gifts to the grandchildren, paperback mysteries, a wooden puzzle, a pocket magnifier, little tools for curiosity. He smirked and called them sweet, like consolation prizes. Performative success likes boxes with logos. Steady care shows up in brown paper and patience. One child pressed the magnifier to the frosting and laughed at the tiny crystals. Relief bloomed, then wilted at his sigh. He teased that I still taught thrift like a hobby, still attached to small things. Chairs creaked, his wife moved a napkin that didn't need moving. The children looked between us, tracking a storm line. Someone cleared a throat, another stared hard at a phone. I poured tea, set the kettle back, and told a story about his mother, how she ran toward hard tasks first, how strength doesn't ask for applause. She tucked notes in his lunch to steady his hands, not to boast. He rolled his eyes, called it sentimental, and swept the air. Loud scorn loves reason's coat. He tapped the table and returned to business. If we streamline, you won't have to deal with any of this later, he said, voice buttering the idea, but the knife still cut. Sign a few forms, I'll handle the rest. He looked at my keys. He doesn't want my house so much as control over uncertainty. Fear often dresses as efficiency. I stood and straightened the manila envelope from my attorney, squared it with the edge, a small ritual of order. Morning will be busy, I said, and left it there. He bristled at the boundary he couldn't see. Micro mistakes turned to micro stings. He joked about my morning walks, called them parades of stubbornness. He asked if I still cut coupons, as if prudence were a flaw. You could be living, he said, instead of tinkering. Tinkering sits lightly yet erases calluses, and nights I kept the lights on with a wrench. I tasted metal, swallowed, and passed another slice of cake. Then a small hand slipped into his. His daughter climbed his knee and whispered, "I like Grandpa's puzzles." He softened like ice under sun. His shoulders dropped. He looked at me, and for a clean moment I saw the boy who helped me sand this table, who once slept holding a screwdriver. "Dad," he started, the word carrying a tremor that could have become apology. Pride is an old reflex. He coughed, squared himself, and the softness clicked shut. "You're teaching smallness," he said, meaning the gifts, the house, perhaps my whole approach to time. They need to see bigger. Pressure returned, sharper for having eased. I felt the house become a scale, love versus display, and knew my weight. "What you call smallness," I said quietly, "has kept our family standing." I offered no proof. Timing is part of truth. They left in quiet fragments, chairs scraped, coats lifted, a final wave. I stacked plates and ran the tap until water warmed, washing each dish until it squeaked. The house cooled by degrees, not emptiness but noise draining away. Silence reset the temperature. It gave me back my breath. I dried the oak table with the old towel we used when he was 13, and the memory steadied my hands. In the hall, I smoothed the attorney's envelope, slid my keys beside it, and set an early alarm. Tomorrow would be calm and private, not a scene. I would answer Worth with plans made long ago and let numbers speak where anger once tried. Morning kept its promise. I woke to the alarm I'd set, made coffee, and called my son before the house fully warmed. I told him I had an errand that mattered and asked if he'd ride along. He hesitated long enough for yesterday to echo, then said he would. We drove with the heater humming, side streets slick with frost, both of us wrapped in a quiet that felt more like truce than peace. The envelope lay between us on the console, and I didn't touch it. The attorney's office was small, orderly, and calm, the kind of room where paper has weight. We sat at a round table while my attorney opened a thick file and turned it so we could see. There were summaries first, then schedules and balances, proceeds from the sale of my repair business years back, rent ledgers for 2 homes I kept debt-free, and conservative accounts that grew slowly because I let time do the heavy lifting. Years of plain choices lined up without flourish, just figures and signatures. He shifted in his chair and leaned closer. Here was the part he hadn't known. The trust was already drafted, names spelled correctly, contingencies thought through. Funds were designated for the grandchildren's education, built to pay tuition before trinkets. A portion would underwrite scholarships at the community college in his mother's name, a quiet thank you to the town that carried us. Some remained reserved for emergencies so no one would lose a night's sleep over a broken furnace again. Useful, not loud. My son looked from the pages to me and back. The bravado he wore last night loosened like an untied knot. "You planned all this," he said, barely above a whisper, more observation than apology. I nodded. Useful has a longer calendar than applause. Responsibility is what you do when no one claps. His shoulders sank an inch, anger draining into something sober, a mix of shame and relief that softened the set of his jaw. I did not press the moment. "There's one more thing," I said, and slid forward a page tabbed in blue. His name sat beside mine as an administrator, not a ruler. "This depends on how we work together," I told him. "Respect is not deference, and stewardship is not control. If he wanted the role, it required listening, clarity, and kindness in public. If he didn't, the plan still protected the children. Fairness without punishment, partnership with boundaries." He exhaled and nodded, eyes wet but steady, and thanked my attorney with a voice that sounded younger. I shook my attorney's hand, then my son's, declining any triumph. This was not a win, it was a reminder of what lasts. On the drive home, the heater hummed again, and the envelope rested quiet in his lap. Afternoon light waited at my kitchen, and so did the cake, and the words we still needed to say. Afternoon light found the old oak table as we set the envelope beside the leftover cake. He poured 2 glasses of milk, then said he was sorry, no explanations, no armor. I let the words settle. I told him I accepted and that this house runs on respect. Even when we disagree, we speak to build, not bruise. He nodded, and something unknotted between us. The room felt wider, the walls exhaled. Quietly we ate, frosting sweet as memory. I said my life never measured itself by square footage or shine. Worth to me was what kept the lights on and people steady, showing up, paying attention, mending what could be mended, releasing what could not. Your mother taught me that continuity is a kind of courage. He looked around as if seeing the room new, the dings in the chair he once kicked, the table we sanded, the good towel by the sink. Useful, he said, and this time it was not a dig. We stacked plates. He slid the envelope into the drawer and asked what came next. We keep caring, I said, out loud. Loud success fades, quiet stewardship lasts. Share the moment substance over show 1.